What's up, Mecha fans, and welcome back to the channel. So today we are once again returning to Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion. We're going to be doing a character tier list, ranking every single major character that appears in both Season 1 and Season 2 of the anime. But before we get into all that, I want to hear from you guys, so head on down to the comment section below, let me know your favourite characters within this series, and while you're there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. I will have a video very similar to this where I'm ranking every single nightmare frame that appears in Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion. Without further ado though, let's get into the tier list. So once again, as per usual, we do have S, A, B, C, D and F tier. I'm not 100% sure whether I'm going to be putting anyone in F, but it's there just in case. And we will kick things off. This isn't in any particular order. This is a tier list that I personally didn't make. So we are starting off with Dearhard Reed. Now this is a character that I think is very interesting in terms of his motivation, in terms of where he stands within, the world, in terms of all the different sides and such, where I don't want to say he wants to be on the right side of history, but he wants to be on the one that's going to be remembered, if you will. And throughout most of the series, that side does end up being the Black Knights and Lelouch. So I think he's a pretty interesting character just in terms of where he stands and just in terms of like what he kind of provides to the series, that different perspective. So I'm personally going to put him up in B tier. Now he might end up moving down to like the top of C, but for now we're going to put him in B tier because, like I said, I just like what he gives to the series. Next up, we've got Gilbert Guilford, who is Cornelia's knight. I think he's solid enough. Like there's this little like subplot a little bit that he has where he's taken over by Geass and such, but I don't think he really offers a whole lot. Like he's a loyal knight to Cornelia, but other than that, on his own, he's not the most interesting character. So I'm going to put him in D. He's not straight up F because there's at least something there, but I don't think he's like overly compelling as like his own person or his own character. Next up, we've got Charles Z. Britannia, who is arguably the main antagonist throughout the majority of the series. I think he's solid. He's kind of one of those villains where there's a presence. He is the overarching monarch emperor. Some people might see him as a dictator. But in terms of a character, there's not a whole lot there. He just kind of represents the typical dictator type person. I don't think he's the most interesting or compelling character, even when it comes to being a villain or an antagonist to Lelouch. I think the whole like mind game scenarios that play out there and like who's smarter and all that kind of stuff, I think there's actually more compelling characters to go up against Lelouch in this series, which we'll talk about soon. I mean, he's a massive part of the series, so we're actually going to go in C. Next up there, we've got Shinichiro Tamaki, should I say? A member of the Black Knights that is very prominent, but he's never really like his own kind of person and all that kind of stuff. There's not a whole lot to him. More of like a comedic relief kind of part of the Black Knights. A likable presence to have, don't get me wrong, but in terms of like major characters in the series, this is not one of my favorites. I think just the fact that he's like a reasonably enjoyable character, I'm going to put him in C, but I'm going to put him right down at the bottom. Next up, then we've got Kaguya Tsuragi. She's fine. She's not the most compelling character ever, and she's not really given loads to do. I mean, I guess she is like politically, but yeah, like just in terms of a standalone character, she's not the most compelling to me. So I'm going to go C again, because I think like she plays a reasonably sized role in the series, but I'm going to go right in the middle of C, just above Shinichiro, because I think she has like a more of a role in the story and she's more important. Next up though, we've got Nagisa Chibi. Now this character, I gotta be honest, really not a whole lot to her. She is kind of getting into like a somewhat of a relationship thing with Todo. That's all there is. There's really that like kind of she loves him, but she's not really getting it back. Unfortunately, I'm actually going F. I just don't think there's really anything to her. Next up, though, we've got Schneisel El Britannia. Now, this is a character that I think is the superior antagonist. Like, this is what I was referring to earlier when I said about the whole mind games thing and how I think there is a character in this that's the better antagonist to Lelouch compared to Charles, and I think it is Schneisel. Of course, you do have that scene at the like whole wedding thing that's going on, or just before the wedding, sorry, the wedding reception, or the pre-wedding, I don't know really what it's called, but you have that whole thing, and you have Lelouch versus Schneisel in a chess match, and it kind of comes to like a stalemate thing where neither of them can really win, and thus you kind of get that like mind game thing going on where like who's smarter than the other, and they're kind of going up against each other in terms of that. And I think that dynamic is the best in the series when it comes to like protagonist, antagonist, mind game type stuff, which Code Geass does a really good job of, and that's of course very prevalent towards the end of the series, kind of moving into that final battle where you do have essentially Schneisel like in his group versus Lelouch and his group, and you have these two sides going against each other, and they are kind of playing mind games in a lot of ways, and I think that's really, really interesting. So I'm actually going to go like in A for now. He might get moved down to the top of B, but I just think in terms of what he's supposed to be in this series, he's damn good. I think he's probably the best at being like the foil to Lelouch. She kind of matches him on intellect, and I feel like that's why he really, really does work. Next up, we've got Callan, who is a major, major character in this series, and as much as I really like her, I think she's great in the action, of course, piloting the Gurren and all this kind of stuff, and I love her character design, I love her as a personality, all that kind of stuff. Like, I really like her. My problem is that I think they struggle to know what to do with her in the series. Of course, she kind of has a thing where she comes to the school and she's, essentially like the person who kind of inducts Zero into the Black Knights, and she's very important in that regard. But I think as the series goes on, they struggle to know exactly what to do with the character to make her interesting, because they kind of give her a little subplot which is at the forefront of the plot for a couple of episodes, with her mother being Japanese and all this kind of stuff. Like, if you've seen the series, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I think that was really interesting, but they kind of drop it after like a couple of episodes or so, and I think they could have done a lot more with it than they did. She could have been an A-tier character if they'd given more for her to do, but for now, we're going to go at the top of B. Next up, we do have another Britannian, should I say, who is Cornelia Lee Britannia. Now, I do actually like Cornelia quite a bit. I think she has a good storyline to her, and she definitely like sits in that realm of being one of the good Britannians, if you will, in terms of that whole family. Like, especially like early on, she's obviously very much involved in action, and she comes across very much as a physical threat to Lelouch. In some ways, maybe a mental threat, but more so I would say physical. For now, we're going to put her right here, but I'm still unsure between these two which one will go there. There's probably more people that will go in front of them though anyway. Next up, we've got Shirley, who is a pretty tragic character in terms of what she goes through, where she has to forget about Lelouch and she loses her father, and there's a lot of tragedy to the character, and ultimately she ends up being killed by Roller, which is obviously very sad. She represents the best in Lelouch, the more human aspects of him, so for that reason she is very, very important in this series, and I do think that there is enough to where she can stand alone as a character as well. So I'm going to go B. I don't know whether I want to put her in front of Callan. I actually think I'm gonna, and maybe it's a little bit of a hot take, I'm not sure, but I do think that Shirley is more important to the story. Moving on, we do have Kyoshiro Todo, who is a big military leader who then like kind of joins up with the Black Knights and such. He just like kind of serves as like a solid like military leader. He serves like his purpose in the story. As his own character with his own story, there's maybe not the most amount there, but he does very much contribute to the action side, the tactics, the military side of things. He's solid. I'm going to put him in C though, but I'm going to put him at the top of C, because I think for the purpose he's supposed to serve, he serves it very well. Next up, we move on to Ogi, who is, I just think is a solid character, he almost feels like just a normal guy. Of course, the Black Knights, they have to do some things to maybe seen as bad or whatever, but I think ultimately there's such good intentions behind him that I think he is one of the most like good characters in terms of like as a person in the series. So I'm going to go B. I'm going to go at the bottom of B though, because I think a lot of these characters just have more interesting storylines. Next up, we move on to Millie Ashford. A lot of her story still feels very disconnected from like everything else, where she's kind of like linked up with Lloyd for a bit, but then she kind of goes off and becomes like a news reporter person. She definitely represents like the good human side of the series and all this kind of stuff, and just the normal stuff like beyond the political corruptness and the action and all that kind of stuff. She kind of grounds a lot of things. So we're going to go C. I'm going to go about here though. Next up, we have Gino Weinberg. I don't really understand the hype of this character. I think there seems to be a lot of people that really like him. I just don't think there's a whole lot to him. He kind of feels like the hotshot pilot, cool guy and that. Not the hugest fan of him, I gotta be honest. I like his design. I like his nightmare frame and all this kind of stuff. And I like him in the action, but I just don't think there's a whole lot there, so I'm going to go D, unfortunately, but I'm going to go right at the top of D. Next up, we'll move on to Vivi. I got to say, probably the most disappointing character, period, in the show. Almost just, like, dies off at one point. It's a very unceremonious death. There's the whole thing of him telling Suzuku about the Geass and all that kind of stuff, so he serves a role in the story. I just don't care about this character. I think it's just really heavily underutilized. So I'm actually going to go F. I'm going to go top of F though. Just a very, very highly underutilized character that could have been great. Just really wasn't utilized in the story as much as they could have been. Next we'll move on to Lloyd, though, who is prominent throughout the whole series. I guess serves like a purpose in terms of like, getting Suzaku into his nightmare frame and into the Lancelot. It's tough to know exactly where to put this character because I like him. I like the energy that he brings to the series. His characterization, there's not a whole lot there. Like, there's not a significant arc or anything like that. Like, if you took him out of the series, it wouldn't change much in terms of story or in terms of character arcs for anyone else. I think I'm going to put him in front of Millie, though. I probably like him more than Millie. Next up, then we'll move on to Nina, who I would say is the better version of what Lloyd is. Lloyd is the scientist guy and all this kind of stuff, and Nina definitely gets connected up with that whole side of things, but I think she has a really good arc. Probably an unpopular opinion, because I hear a lot of shit about this character, and I think that's more so people's like non-critical, non-objective mind coming into it, where they don't like the things that she does. And the things that she does in this series are pretty bad. But I think she is a very interesting character. I think she has a really good character arc. And therefore, I think she's a great character in the series, I gotta say. I'm actually gonna go, and maybe this is a really hot take, I'm actually gonna go the top of B. I think she's a really good character that stands alone, has her own storyline that ties into everything else as well. Next up, we do actually have Euphemia. I think she's a really, really good character, and she serves a massive purpose in the story. Essentially the catalyst for the latter parts of season 1, but definitely season 2. Like, she completely switches up the story, and she's just a really tragic character as well, where she legitimately wants to do good, and you see that through her. All her intentions are good and would potentially lead to really good things, but just unfortunately she gets wrapped up in the whole Geass thing, unintentionally so. Lelouch doesn't mean to tell her to go kill all the Japanese, but ultimately that's what happens, and it's really tragic because this is a character that wanted to do good. Things went south, things went the wrong way, and it wasn't really anyone's fault, and she's just ultimately a tragedy of this series. It's just one of those things that happened, and it's very, very unfortunate. But I think she's a really, really good character. Someone who's very kind-hearted, which, like I said, just the storyline there, the ultimate ending for the character, I'd probably say is like second to Lelouch in terms of character conclusion. We're putting her in A, actually. We're moving her up to A. We're putting her just behind Schneisel. Next up, we've got Cecile Krumi, who is very much involved in the series. Doesn't really have a lot of major characterization to her standalone, but I do like her relationship with Lloyd. I like that kind of mentorship, kind of thing she has going on a little bit with Suzaku, and I just think that she is a solid character. Not the most amazing ever, but I'm actually going to put her like in C. I'm going to put her about right here though. Next up, we've got Li Jingqi. Gets down and dirty in that action sometimes, which is really, really cool. Especially when he kind of goes up against Lelouch and all that kind of stuff. I like that they gave him his own storyline. I think that's pretty good. I think I'm going to go in B because he does have his own character arc there. I'm going to go behind Ogi though, just because Ogi is a good character. I like Ogi. Next up, we've got Anya Alstream. I never really thought she was the most amazing character ever, but they kind of give her this backstory thing that ties her in with Lelouch's mother, and it's a very interesting thing that they do. But as a character, she's kind of meh. I think I'm going to go in C with her just because I do like the way that they tie things in and such, but we're going right at the bottom of C for her. Next up, we've got Jeremiah Gottwald, Orange himself. A bit of a weird character, I gotta be honest. I don't know whether I overly like him or not, but at the same time, he's got a very interesting arc where he's high up in the Britannian army, and then he kind of goes downhill a little bit, but then he's kind of using it as a subject of experiment, and ultimately ends up serving Lelouch. An interesting character journey, let's just say that. So purely on that fact, I'm going to go B. Now, I think I'm going to go in front of Li Jingqi. We're going to go above Ogi as well. Do I want to go above Diethard, though? I think I do. I'm actually moving him in front of Cornelia. He goes through a lot in the series, and I got to give respect to, anyone getting that amount of, changes throughout a storyline. I think that's pretty good. So Jeremiah's going right in the middle of B there. And next up, we move on to the main man himself, Lelouch v Britannia, or Lelouch Lamperouge. I mean, we know where this guy's going. Of course, he's going at the top of S, and he is staying at the top of S. One of the best main characters, one of the best protagonists to ever grace anime. I would argue to ever grace fiction. Perfect character arc that he goes through. Just one of the best character endings, one of the best character deaths of all time. Code Geass would not be the series that it is without Lelouch. Next up, we've got Revels, and most of the time I would put this character in a very low tier, or at least this kind of character. But I think what makes Revels like an interesting character in the show is that he truly is the most human person. Like, ultimately, he doesn't really go through a lot of massive character change throughout the series, but I think it really does work because even if you look at the people that are more involved in the school, like Nina, like Shirley, like Millie, they all go through a lot of change throughout the series, and some more significant than others. Then getting involved in the action, people, someone like Shirley, of course, getting killed and getting involved with the Geass stuff. Whereas, like, of course, then you've got Millie, who kind of goes through characterization and kind of growing up as a character, but it's more so in terms of her life and her career and such. Revel's just kind of going through the motions and such. I want to go in B with him, but I don't think he's quite in B just because, like I said, there's not a whole lot of change that he goes through, but I just think in terms of what he represents, I'm going to go right at the top of C. In fact, no, I'm moving him to B, but he's going to go right at the back of B. And next up, though, we'll move on to CC, who is, of course, one of the best characters in the series, an iconic, if you will. Lelouch and CC, they go hand in hand. They're easily like the iconic duo of Code Geass, and they're both very iconic characters in their own right. She is the catalyst for the series as a whole. She is one of the most, I would maybe say the most important character in the series. If you take her out, the series simply does not exist, or doesn't exist in the same way anyway. For CC, we're going at the top of A. I think her relationship with Lelouch is just great. There's so much history and rich lore behind her, and of course the Geass itself, but especially just with her character, I just think there is so much there that is not only explored throughout the series, but there's also so much untapped potential maybe that could be explored if they ever choose to go down that route. Next up though, we've got Suzuku, who is a character that I thought most people liked. There's a lot of people that hate this character, and I don't really understand why. I think it's a similar kind of case with Nina, where they don't like what the character does, but they're kind of not looking at it from an objective standpoint of like, is this character well written? And I think Suzuku is one of those characters. I'm going to go in A, towards the top of A. I think you've got a great rivalry between Lelouch and Suzuku. It is obviously a very different rivalry to that you have with Lelouch and Schneider, where that's more of like a mind game, both kind of being as smart as each other and kind of outwitting each other in ways. But Lelouch and Suzuku, you have lots of history between them, two best friends turned mortal enemies kind of thing. And I think that's one of those like character acts that just kind of works. It feels very Shakespearean in a way. It's got that Shakespearean tragedy, that epic feeling of like, drama and love, revenge, all this kind of stuff. And I think it really does work. And I think Suzuku as a character on his own is really good. Also has one of the best excuses for plot armors I have ever seen, where he's told by Lelouch, you need to live. That completely sticks with him because it's essentially an order from the Geass, which you have to follow. And I think it's one of the best ways you could ever do plot armor ever, where, yeah, like if he survives an absurd situation, it makes sense within the confines of the universe, so you can't really argue with it. And next up, we've got Nunnally, who is one of the most important characters in the show. I think in terms of being a character herself, I don't think she's one of the greatest ever. She feels very much like a plot device, which is kind of unfortunate in some ways. Like, it makes sense for the show, but I do wish that they characterized her on her own a little bit more. But she's just a kind-hearted individual that has a great relationship with Lelouch, and it's kind of tragic when you get towards the end and she, kind of comes face to face with him like at his worst, but ultimately she's the one that's there when he is killed and understands the whole situation, all that kind of stuff. It's tragic stuff, but I just do wish sometimes that she was characterized on her own a little bit more than she is. So we're going to go in B, but I think we're going to go about here, maybe. Next up, though, we've got Rakshata Chola, who is kind of the scientist person. She's behind a lot of the technology for the Black Knights later on in the series anyway, at least later on in the first season and season 2. There's backstory touched on between her and Lloyd in like a previous, I don't know whether they were in a romantic relationship or whether it was purely like work related. I don't really know, but I don't think there's really much to a character at all. So unfortunately with this character, we're going to go in F, and I'm actually going to go above Vivi because I kind of like her personality. And next up though, we'll move on to Rolo, who comes into the series in the second season as Lelouch's brother, and it's all messed up kind of stuff. Another tragic character, but also someone who definitely represents that like moral ambiguity that you have in the series, where he does bad things. He kills people. He kills Shirley, which is of course a terrible thing. It's a character that we all love, but you do feel sorry for him because he's never truly had love. And even when he has like this fake relationship with Lelouch, this fake sibling relationship, like, it's still real to him. And even towards the end, even when Lelouch basically says, I hate you, you're not my brother, I don't give a shit about you, all this kind of stuff, he still, like, essentially sacrifices his life to save Lelouch. And it's really tragic because you see that he truly believed in that relationship, but it simply was not there. And ultimately, Lelouch just used him as a pawn. It's sad. Truly another tragic character in the series. So I'm going to go in B. I think I'm actually going to go above Shirley though as well. I think I'll put him above Nina. So we'll put him like at the top of B. And then last, but certainly not least, we've got Villetta New. Not my favourite character in the series, but again, much like Jeremiah, she goes through a lot of change throughout the series. Maybe not quite as much as Jeremiah, but you know, they're kind of together as pretty high up within the Britannian military. Then she kind of has a bit of an amnesiac situation where she loses all the memory or not all of the memory, but she loses quite a lot of it. And then she ends up with Ogi. They kind of get like a romantic thing going on and such. And she learns about her past, all that kind of stuff comes back to her. And yeah, just like she goes through like interesting characterization, and she's kind of stuck where she gets all her memories back, but then she still has these feelings that she had when she didn't have a memory. So then she's like heavily conflicted between Ogi and the Black Knights and the Britannian Empire. So I think she's an interesting character. I would put her in B. I think I would put her in front of Ogi, but I think I'm going to drop her right here because I like Diethard's like involvement really within the story. But I do think I'm going to move some things around here because thinking about it now, as much as I like Cornelia, she doesn't have like the most interesting of personality traits or role in the story. I just think that Diethard's whole thing of wanting to be on like this certain side of history, I think is just interesting. Like it feels unique as a character trait. So we're going to put him above Cornelia. So there we have it. That is my tier list for Code Geass. This is every single major character. Of course, we've got Lelouch right in that S tier, and then in F tier, we've got these three characters. B is obviously very heavily loaded, but I think there are some really solid characters in this series. Lelouch, he had to go at the top. He is by far the best. Before I get out there though, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Like I did say at the start of the video, I'll have a tier list similar to this where we're ranking every single nightmare frame that appears in Lelouch of the Rebellion. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today, and I'll see you guys next time.